And good evening and welcome to this Tuesday night edition of The People's Show with Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator of the Tuesday night edition of the Legal Hour. Here with you at 9 o'clock. Coming up and joining me will be Cook County Circuit Court Judge Leonard Murray, who is always with us here to answer all of your legal questions that you have. And of course, you can type your legal question into the chat tonight. And guess what? Next week, you're going to be able to call in to the People's Show, and you will be able to ask your question directly to the judge. I'll be taking callers at our podcast starting next week. We're getting it all set up so that we can have real dialogue, just like you used to have when I was on terrestrial radio. And so we're gonna have real dialogue and that sort of thing. So we're stepping up the game a little bit. So next week you will be able to call in, and I'll be able to have a conversation with you, and we can go back and forth. Of course, I am excited to announce that 10 by 10 to Win has voted to support Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, for the presidency, to support, work, and vote for Kamala Harris for the presidency of the United States of America, November the 5th. So we are going to be working hard. We're going to be doing all that we can to support the presumptive nominee, Kamala Harris. Earlier tonight, I was on the west side of Chicago with the National Action Network, and also was Attorney Ben Crump and the Leadership Network, and a host of other people. And of course, black men showed up in real numbers. Of course, there were sisters there, the women were there, and all of the news media were there. And we were good to see the support for the family of Sonya Massey, who was killed by a Springfield cop, shot in the face in her own home when she called for help. And because she saw what was an intruder, and the intruder ended up becoming the cop who she called for help. And of course, here we are again, saying that we're standing with another black family who are the victim of a cop killer killing their family member. And we have yet another wound that we are going to have to mourn and deal with. And then you have, of course, one of the presidential candidates, the Republican nominee, who wants to give police officers 100% immunity. I read off to you Project or Agenda 47, since there are those who want to say, well, he doesn't know anything about Project 2025, and this was written by the Heritage Foundation. And sure, it was written by the Heritage Foundation, but people who crafted it by the Heritage Foundation were people who were his closest employees in his administration. And many of those would be people that he would be appointing to cabinet posts. So, of course, he could say, I don't know anything about it, which is pretty true of most things about Donald Trump. He doesn't know a whole lot of things about a whole lot of stuff, right? And so that's pretty accurate. But I found some clips, and I want to share one of those Project 2025 clips with you that I found out of many that I found that just gives you a snapshot of what 2025, Project 2025 is, the agenda that they want to implement in the first 180 days of the next conservative presidency. So if Donald Trump doesn't know anything about it, if Donald Trump doesn't agree with it, then why are they saying in the manifesto that it is something that they want to implement in the first 180 days of the next conservative administration? So if Donald Trump happens to become the president of the United States, that would be conservative administration, right? Yeah. So here is um, a bird's eye snapshot summary of some of the things that Project 2025 has in it. Now, it's a very difficult read. It's a difficult read, and it is probably crafted that way so that you won't read it. Most people won't read it. And those of us who have the responsibility to make sure that we read stuff that we don't enjoy reading so that we can understand it and so that we could summarize it and capsulize it and give you the facts and the substance of what it is, good or bad. In this case, it's not good. Not good. I think I saw one thing that could be good. And that one thing that could be good is seeing if we could get prayer back into our schools. I am not opposed to that. But take a look at this.
Project 2025. You may have heard about it in the news, but I want to tell you about the dangerous reality of what it is. It is a 900-page blueprint for an authoritarian takeover. This agenda aims to strip away women's reproductive freedoms by implementing a nationwide abortion ban, even in cases of rape or incest. It would also defund Planned Parenthood and other organizations that provide essential health services to millions of women. On the border, Project 2025 includes draconian border policies that are designed to tear families apart. It seeks, for example, to reinstate family separations and implement mass deportations. Project 2025 calls for the rollback of environmental protections, dismantling our regulations that keep our air and water clean. It proposes opening up national parks and protected lands to oil drilling and mining, which would of course prioritize corporate profits over our planet's health. This whole plan is a direct attack on our democracy, aiming to concentrate power in the hands of a few while stripping away the rights and protections of the many. So this November, let's make sure that Project 2025 never becomes a reality.
Yeah, let's make sure that Project 2025 never becomes a reality. Now, that is yours, mine, responsibility to share this information with the people in our trusted circles, in our trusted networks, right? So that we can make sure that people understand if, in fact, they are considering supporting the other side because they're angry or because they're not informed, they don't understand, and they don't know what this administration has delivered, which this administration has transformationally delivered. Transformationally delivered policies that are positively impacting and will positively impact Black communities as well as the country for decades to come if we continue the mission, playing the long game, and allowing for them to become institutionalized. They cannot become attacked and reversed by the agenda of the so-called Republican Party. You and I stand in the way and stand in defense of these great policies that this administration has been able to remarkably pass. Agendas like the Build Back Better, the $1.9 trillion Build Back Better American Rescue, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, CARES Act 2. All of these policies, these major pieces of legislation that this president and vice president has been able to pass are transformational. I go through the details from the U.S. Treasury Department that has put out a report specifically showing how these policies and in these policies and out of these policies are benefiting and investing in Black communities. Let's take the manufacturing, the infrastructure bill, where it was just announced. Let me pull it up. I want to make sure that I got it right. Something that I've been advocating for, we've been advocating for a long time. That was a real stabilizer in the Black community and employment and labor in the Black community from 50s through the 70s. That was absolutely devastated by conservative politics, Ronald Reagan, when he came into office. But this president has worked remarkably smart and brilliant to be able to bring back manufacturing, where there has been more than 46,000 projects that are started all across the country. We have 3 of them, one down in Kankakee, one in Belvedere, and one just announced that's coming in Chicago. That's just a start. That will be transformational. Of course, the South Suburban Airport is moving forward. It's taken a long time, 30 years, but it's moving forward, getting closer to that point. The bill has been signed by the governor for a request for qualifications to go out. So there was money that came into $449 million came into the state of Illinois from the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS and Science Act for airports, ports, roads, bridges. So let me see if I can look this up so that I get the language right. I want to make sure that that I get the information right. Okay, folks, I need for you all to hold on just a second, just 1 second. I need you to hold on just a second. Judge Murray is having a problem logging on. Let me send him another link so that he can get on. Okay, so you all just hang on for me just a second, please. One second, so here we go. Okay. We'll sign it there. Okay. Do it there, and there we go. Okay. All right. It's off there, and okay, I'm gonna come back in here, folks. All right. All right. So we got that settled. So while Judge Murray is coming in, he had some problems with the link, so I had to uh, redo the invitation. But I just want to get this off to you. Here it is. U.S. Steel South Work site wins a massive quantum project. Illinois is making a giant bet on quantum computing on the far south side of Chicago. That project was just announced. Now, being that that project was just announced, we still have to do work. We still have to make sure that the governor, we have to make sure that our state reps, state senators, and all of those people, our aldermen, our mayor, to make sure that in this deal that we have committed to, that in exchange for tax credit, that part of that has to be to make sure that people from the south side of Chicago, Black people from the south side of Chicago, men and women, even those who have some marks against their name, cannot be excluded and have to be given an opportunity to get those jobs. 60% of those jobs should go to Black people on the south side of Chicago. We have to fight for it. We have to demand for it. And the only way that we have the power to do that, that's why I keep telling us that unless we organize ourselves together, they're going to roll right over us, even investing in these initiatives in our communities. We cannot sit on the sidelines. We cannot just have these bench conversations. When I say bench conversations, meaning that we just talk about it with people who we're comfortable with, but we don't put our talk into a collective movement to make sure that our communities are not missed, that our communities are not disrespected. We must understand that it is a requirement of ours, that we have to be engaged in the process in order for us to make sure those things happen. Yes, it's great that there has been a whirlwind of change in the last week in the Democratic energy and the Democratic nominee with Kamala Harris, the vice president, who is now the presumptive nominee. There's a whole new renewed energy. But we've got to take that renewed energy and we got to make sure that there is victory in November, and we have to make sure that there is a continuation of the work that has been accomplished in this administration by her administration going forward. So we have to give her a Congress that she can get policies passed, meaning that we need to give her the supermajority, not just the majority. We need to give her the supermajority in the Senate. We need to make sure that we give her back the House. In order for her to be able to move these policies forward and to reverse some of these draconian policies and draconian laws that the Republicans have been able to get in place, and those things that they've been able to take away, we have to do more than just elect her. Yes, we have to elect her, and yes, we have to make sure down the ballot that we give her a Congress that she can get things to neutralize these MAGA folks. Absolutely neutralize them. All right, joining me now is my guest, Cook County Circuit Court Judge Leonard Murray, who is always with us every week, taking your legal questions. Any questions that you have for the judge, type them into the legal chat, and I'll read them off to the judge, and the judge will answer your legal questions. Starting next week, you will no longer have to type your questions in the chat, because we'll have a phone number that you'll be able to call into the program, and we'll be able to have dialogue with you, just as I have in the past when I was on terrestrial radio. Welcome to the program, Judge Murray. How you doing?
Good evening, Mark. Doing well. How are you?
Good. Just got back, went out west to the Remembering Sonya Massey Rally, um, which is one that we have to show up to. Unfortunately, we have to show up to another rally of a black person being shot and killed. I don't know if I can't use the term that I want to use because they haven't, it hasn't been adjudicated to that, but I'll just say that based on the footage from the body cam, that another senseless cop killing of a woman in her home, shot dead, shot in the face because of holding a teapot of hot water down in Springfield.
Well, it's certainly a tragic event, and we all hope for justice in this case. Uh, I haven't really followed the case that closely up to this point, but as I understand it, the officer who killed her has been indicted and charged with murder. Has been fired from I think it's the Springfield Police Department, and is facing charges. I think he is being held on a uh, uh, no bond bail order. So unless something changes there, he would be detained until such time as the trial occurs.
Yes, I was just trying to pull up any recent article. His name is Deputy Sean Gratian. Former Sheriff's Deputy Sean Gratian is charged with first-degree murder, aggravated battery with a firearm, and official misconduct in the death of 36-year-old Sonya Massey for the July shooting. Um, 36 years old. She has two children. They appear to be um, 14 or 15 years old. And of course, we were there. We had again at another rally, and I looked around and to see all of the news cameras that were there, the media that was there, and um, and at one point, I'm glad to see that there was coverage. I'm glad to see there was coverage. But on the other hand, I also had these mixed feelings because you see this type of coverage because it brings viewers to the news, and the news is important. It's an important part of our medium. Um, but when is it? When is it that we are going to see real progress in the stopping of what seems to be more and more elevated of cops killing black people um, without warrant? Without warrant, I guess the question becomes that we all ask, what is it going to take for that to happen?
Uh, that's I know we used to talk about something being a $64,000 question. I would say that's probably now the $1 billion question. Uh, um, it's it's hard. It's inexplicable. It's difficult to understand how it could occur, um, given that um, police officers are required to uh, have certain training, learning to de-escalate, um, and taking into account those that they encounter and the relative uh, level of threat posed by those that they encounter. So if you weigh all of these factors, you would think it would be seldom the case that we would be dealing with something of this sort. Um, but it does seem that more often than not, um, we're faced with with these kind of tragedies.
Yeah, this happened on the 6th of July, and it took more than 2 weeks for them to release the body cam. And of course, you, as even though our state capital is down in Springfield, it's still one of those kind of an obscure communities that the only thing that you associate Springfield with is the state capital. Um, you know, Government. You don't really pay attention to who lives there. But what's life like in Springfield? What's the population there? So this could happen in a rather obscure community, and maybe they thought that this could happen and could go unnoticed. And the first time that I saw the story that was broken uh, to me on uh, on Facebook or one of the social media outlets. It was not one that I saw on the news. I saw the news on social media, and the clip that I saw didn't really explain what was going on. I just knew that there had to be something where there were a group of people who were talking about a senseless, another senseless shooting. But when we learned about more of the details of what that was and how that came about, I know that we sometimes um, try to analyze these, but they're all egregious, right? They're all egregious. George Floyd was egregious. Laquan McDonald was egregious. Um, the uh, the kid down in Florida was egregious. Um, they're all egregious, but there is, and I'm not suggesting that hers was worse, but to see a police officer for no provoked reason to shoot a woman who is on her knees practically in the face. They said that, she was, the bullet uh, hit just below her eye, her right eye, and came out through her neck, the back of her neck. Um, it's just unthinkable. It's just unthinkable that this kind of thing could continuously happen in 2024 after all that we've seen. And you hear little of anything coming from people who are in our national government saying anything about this. Of course, the president has stated something about this, and Vice President Kamala Harris stated something about this. But you don't hear, and I have not heard anything from any of the other so-called um, political leaders in Congress about such an egregious act.
Yeah, you're correct. I have not heard anything either. And you know, our system gives presumption of innocence to those who are accused. Um, but you might expect um, that there would be some commentary made by political leaders, um, not suggesting guilt or innocence at this point, but just talking about the tragedy. Um, and questioning how could something like this happen, and again, without uh, suggesting right or wrong in a situation. I think, given the facts, many people have likely concluded what they think uh, the outcome is here. But in any event, you might think that leadership, political leaders, elected political leaders, uh, might speak out about this tragedy. We now have two children who have lost their mother at relatively young ages. So, what is their life going to be like without their mom? I don't know much about. I haven't heard anything about the situation of their father, but mother was taking care of them. So there's got to be a huge hole in their lives now, given that she's been taken away, particularly under the circumstances that they were. I have not heard uh, where they were at the time of the shooting, if they were in the house with her or elsewhere, but it's still it's got to be very devastating for the two of them to now live with this fact that mom was gone.
Yeah, it's you really become, you almost feel helpless, that you just don't know how to put the words together to convey a thought that would have any kind of impact. This is happening all too frequently, and the best that we can do is to have a rally to say that we're going to support the family, support the children, um, only to wonder when is the next and where is the next going to be. I don't think that that's the way a society is supposed to be.
Well, certainly, your last comment is appropriate. That none of us want to live in a society where violence exists, um, be it in the situation that Ms. Massey faced, or anyone else for that matter. You know, no matter what you think about the Trump presidency, or at least the campaign for presidency, we can't condone that violence. And the attempt made on his life either. It's just not a good situation. It's not the kind of society that any of us should want to be part of and have to witness.
Agreed that if we're civilized people, no matter whether it's somebody that we disagree with, um, um, politically or period, that we would support violence, period.
Right.
Um, and I hope, I hope for this every day, that we would have people who would stand and finally decide, you know what, we have to be better. We have to be better than this. That we can have political discord, support what we think our values are or what our values are, without having to incite what we have seen incited over the past, you know, uh, I, I go back to 2008 is where I say it started. Um, and it only gotten worse. Um, but you certainly expect for people in political leadership positions, representative positions, to represent, at the very least, character, conscience, and courage, of decency, at the very least.
Yes, I think that's not an unrealistic expectation. Uh, that's a minimum standard that should exist. But of course, we should all aspire to a higher standard of living in peace in society.
I've had to check myself, if you will, as someone who, has somewhat of a platform, to really self-evaluate the way that I may convey positions um, that I disagree with or agree with, or certainly positions that I disagree with, to making sure that that disagreement is not conveying the same kind of behavior that we don't condone from others. I think we all have that basic minimum level of responsibility.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, but anyway, it was. I don't even know how to characterize what happened. It was just another one of those unfortunate times that we had to be there for, you know, such a devastating purpose to see, that we had a bunch of black people in a room, but it was not for anything positive, not for anything positive, but it was, another event. There was a young man who did a spoken word. He was 22 years old, and his spoken word reflected those same thoughts about here it is again, the same uh, situation, different name and different location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we should not overlook is the fact that there seems to be the sense in our community that we have to have these sort of demonstrations in order to draw attention to uh, the fact of this woman's loss of life, to ensure that that justice is received by her, by society in general, in particular, her two sons. Um, but so, what does that say about our society? That there's a sense that there must be this gathering and this demonstration uh, of outrage regarding what occurred in order to foster uh, the likelihood that justice will occur.
Well, yeah, but I think in part though, it what it also conveys is unfortunately that we are in these situations far too often. But I think it also conveys to the broader community and certainly to the broader representation that we're not going to sit quietly by, um, that we are going to be vigilant to making sure that we do see justice. So I think that in part that it's unfortunately that we have to do that um, in order to uh, make sure that the people who are responsible in our government for working to bring justice in these types of situations, in particular when it is police involved shootings, when we know that all too often police officers have gotten away with no accountability for actions that many believe to be criminal. I think there was a report here that came out of an analysis, not just in Chicago, but this was a report, and I wish I still had it, but it was a report that someone had done about police misconduct settlements all around the country and how so many cases of police misconduct never have any accountability because they reached a settlement without there being any acknowledgement of any wrongdoing. And they showed where there was a pattern of these police officers who were involved in three or more of these incidents in their particular location. This was around the country that they were involved in some sort of incidents that caused the local municipality to have to settle it. But because it was settled, there was no accountability and no acknowledgement of any wrongdoing, which is a problem in and of itself as well.
But that speaks to a different issue, Mark, and that is the fact of a settlement, which is the nature of a civil matter, uh, does not speak to why it is there was no criminal prosecution initiated in those situations, um, because the agreement with the municipal government or state government that's involved, that employs the officers or parties involved in guess, a law enforcement shooting, it has nothing to do with the question of whether or not there should be a criminal prosecution for the act. They're separate government entities, one not controlled by the other. And whether or not the uh, prosecutor elects to file charges, it has no bearing on whether or not the civil, um, at least the municipal government that employed the officers, elects to engage in a settlement of a potential civil claim. I think they're two different issues, and uh, just because there is a settlement reached does not mean there still can't be criminal prosecution. If you look at the George Floyd situation, uh, there was a civil settlement reached on behalf of his family, but at the same time, all of those officers were prosecuted.
Yeah, I think that that was one of the few times that we have seen those examples. I think when I read this report, that was a very eye-opening to me. That in terms of settling what was a uh, basic liable settlement, and the question was, why was there no criminal investigation or charges brought if in fact you had to settle something, or if in fact you settle something civilly? um, in my view, leans to that there should be a thorough investigation of whether or not there were criminal um, that there were criminal conduct that warrants criminal charges. But in many of those cases, it was over at the point of settlement. There was never any further investigation of, whether there were criminal acts committed.
I can't speak to it. It's not something that I follow closely. And given the possibility of a matter appearing before me, I won't comment on it. But other than to say, uh, you know, the facts leading to uh, the, the civil settlement are the same facts that could lead to a criminal prosecution. It's the same. It's the same elements, if you will. Um, so the fact that there is a settlement reached, the decider of criminal prosecution is not the family that may realize compensation for the loss. You got a prosecutor of some sort elected or appointed, or some other way of reaching the position, who makes that determination. They are not normally involved in the negotiation of compensation. It's a separation of powers situation, if you will. So I understand your point, but I don't know that it is necessarily the case that the existence of a civil settlement should have any bearing whatsoever on whether or not there is a criminal prosecution.
Yeah, um, I hope and pray that we get better. I hope and pray that we get better. Um, and that too sounds like a broken record, because we hear that um, every time after these kinds of incidents, or you have some group who wants to deflect by saying, well, what about black on black crime is the go-to, right? Is the go-to deflector, um, when in fact there's really no such thing as black on black crime, because most people do things to people that they're familiar with, black or white. I happen to watch these mystery investigations stories for hours, snapped, and all of those. Most of the cases that they're highlighting on there are not black people. They're not black people, but the cases that they do highlight are generally a case where people who look like the same people are committing those acts of violence. So this idea of trying to reduce it to black on black crime, like it is the only, um, it's the only people that's doing that to people who look like them, when in fact the numbers speak very differently. It's just another form of a deflection. So it's very upsetting. It's just one of those things that upsetting that you feel absolutely helpless. That what can we do? What should we be doing? And who solves it? Who solves this problem? Because when I look at that video, what was the threat? What was the threat?
Yeah, I have not seen the video. I think you mentioned earlier that the municipality or governmental entity involved who employed the officer, uh, it took them a couple weeks or so to release it.
Yes.
So I've not come across it yet, and not. But in any event, um, you would hope that officer training would help to avoid the situation. We don't know what went through that officer's mind in that confrontation. From what I understand, Miss Massey was holding a teapot, um, and I think was on the floor, I believe, or in a sitting position on the floor, I think. So you really wonder, even if it was hot water, um, which might have stung for a bit, but certainly isn't life-threatening situation. But just what was he thinking uh, uh, before and at the instance of pulling a trigger? Um, just what level of consciousness did he have during this incident? And maybe even understanding that might be helpful going forward in terms of training of police officers, because it's very difficult to understand. Um, and again, not passing judgment on it, but you know how this happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, very tough. Very tough. That my sister, not by not by a police officer. My sister at 36 years old, um, who suffered really bad addiction problems, was murdered at the age of 35. And for children to lose their parent um, to violent act, it absolutely has an impact on them. It had an impact on my niece and my nephew greatly. In fact, on all three of them, all three of the children, that they suffered adjusting problems that you saw later come out in activity, not excusing it, but it becomes an issue if they don't get the kinds of counseling and support and help dealing with this. Um, you know, they we'll deal with it, and a lot of times it will be negative, negative outcomes or negative results. So I hope that these children get the kind of support, get the kind of counseling that they need to help them get through this, and then to help them be able to move on, because they're never going to, you know, I guess when I say move on, it's to be able to live with this, but still be productive.
Well, I too lost a sister to gun violence. Wrong place, wrong time in Chicago. So she had my niece, a teenage daughter at that point, who has moved on and has done quite well for herself. But certainly there was a period of adjustment uh, required and support for her to continue to mature and be successful in her efforts. But it was a struggle. It was a definite struggle. Um, um, it's trying to understand how it happened. Wasn't police involved shooting, but just a situation in the neighborhood. Um, Wrong place, wrong time, and it ultimately, I think, caused my dad to die. He grieved over the loss of my sister. I think for a year or so, and ultimately he succumbed uh, to just the thought of the loss. So it wasn't just one tragedy; it was two tragedies
Yeah,
involved.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That is an unenviable group that we are certainly a part of, and of course, um, my sister's death and murder was never resolved. So, but um, you do, you do. Um, some need more help than others, and certainly I was able to move forth. I think that even some of my siblings had issues, but you know they got worse. Um, and I don't know if that had any direct correlation with it, but it's certainly, I think that it does have some impact. Um, all right. Well, listen, we've got a few minutes left, and I know that sometimes it's hard to transition from these types of things. I think Bernard Phillips says black is conscious and not a color anymore. Period. Not sure what that means, um, but so um, yeah. Uh, yeah, well, I think that we are going to have to find we're going to have to find a way that um, brings more protection to our people. And just we've been talking about this violence against Black women here in Chicago, right? And then in the outer areas, but certainly, um, you know, there is a disproportionate um, attack on Black women that before that story that I saw that was done by Dorothy Tucker, I don't know that we really comprehensively thought about it. Um, but I was glad to see, in a very sad situation, I was glad to see so many men that were there standing up and being supportive tonight. That was um, it was a very, very noticeable scene that there were a lot of Black men that showed up tonight. All right. Well, we're going to move forward. We got a few minutes left. We're going to move forward. Is there anything that legally speaking, that you could share with us? Uh, you know, that we talked about either last week that we didn't finish or we left off talking about. I know that there were some things that one viewer talked about arbitration, whether or not it was legal, not legal, um, and that sort of thing. And I think that you did address it a little bit.
My recollection of the question is whether or not an employment contract could contain a provision that would require the employee to waive the ability to bring a claim um, for employment discrimination against the employer uh, in a court of law, or at least in a process, in an adjudicative process outside of arbitration. And in fact, under Illinois law, you cannot waive that right. Um, so you cannot be forced to arbitrate the issue of an employment discrimination claim. You have a right to file that claim with the Illinois Human Rights uh, Commission, uh, and normally simultaneously, when you file such a complaint, the EEOC, Employment um, Equal Employment Office, I think that's the name of it. Um, um, I may have that acronym wrong, but it also opens up a complaint there. So no matter which of the two agencies you initiate the claim in, it automatically opens up the claim in the corresponding division of either the state government or federal government, based on where you started. But
So
cannot be required to waive your right to adjudicate such a claim in a court of law.
you cannot, you cannot be forced to waive your right, but you also, um, it's also, I guess, one of the questions was it also legal for someone to make you sign an employment contract that has that you agree to arbitration? Um, and that was a question that one of the viewers had last week. I believe that your answer to that was,
Well, that could be a condition of employment so long as it does not involve uh, uh, issues related to discrimination. Um, so you could have a dispute over, say, for example, salary, which would require arbitration if you're not claiming that it involves discrimination. If you are claiming that the salary dispute is one that involves discrimination, then that provision would be ineffective.
yes, yes. Okay, well, look, uh, folks, we had a little bump in the road tonight because I had forgotten I'd forgotten to send the link, and I thought that I did send the link, but I forgotten to send the link so that the judge could come on. So we got a little bit of a late start tonight, plus the fact we were talking about something that is just so devastating in the shooting and the death of Sonya Massey down in Springfield. But next week, we're going to try to have something special for you, so make sure you tune in. And next week, you'll be able to call in and to have a conversation or to ask your question directly without having to type it into the chat. So we're going to be all set up next week where you'll be able to call into the program. So we're going to get it all set up this week, get it tested out to make sure that on next week's program that we may have something special for you. But we certainly are going to be able to have you to be able to call in and ask your question of Judge Murray. So that's going to do it for us this week. Make sure you all tune in next Monday to the Monday night edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com, as well as next Tuesday, on the Tuesday edition of the People Show's Legal Hour with Cook County Circuit Court Judge Leonard Murray, with us every week taking your legal questions. Good night.